Welcome back, everybody. My name is Doc, and this is our third devlog episode with our game Karvaros. If you haven't heard of Karvaros, check out our website. There's a link in the description below. You can also see our different socials and see what is kind of happening with us. In our last devlog, we kind of talked about a tutorial I chose to follow because it was closest to creating a Dark Souls game, and I felt like it would help guide me. We also talked about setting goals and how to do it, and in today's video we're going to be jumping into what progress I actually made in the tutorial I chose to follow. So let's get into it. So one of the first things we did in the tutorial was set up a compatible system where you could use your keyboard and mouse and a controller. The other one is creating the character controller system in the game, making it so the character is going to move properly and all those animations were blending properly. The other important thing is we started basically implementing all the animations that he provides with the tutorial, which is great, but we did it in a way that works and makes sense and was not the trash way that I showed in my first devlog of how I did it originally. So one of the core things I like that he does is in all the layers of your animation controller, he creates this override layer. You got things like your attack animations, rolling, basically anything you want to override your typical movement. Like for instance, if you want to say hitting the trigger button will attack, code is going to say play this animation, and it's going to play it in the empty override. And that empty override has a script that says when this is playing, you're going to override all the other animations. So we also worked with some physics-based stuff within the game. For instance, making it so that your character would track if they were on the ground or if they were falling off something, especially in terms of like if you were to attack and step off of an edge of some kind of cliff or object. You want to make sure that your character's not going to just get stuck and float there and then fall. You want them to fall with it and actually have gravity affect them. Secondly, we started working with the camera controls. It would follow the character at the right distance that you wanted, but you could rotate that camera around the character. And then also we implemented a lock-on system. Click that in and it's going to lock on to your nearest target. And then by moving that, which usually will move your camera, you now have your camera fixated on the target and your player moves and the camera will make sure it moves with your player. That way your player character is always going to be in the shot, but it's always also going to be focused on that enemy type. But then when you move your joystick on the horizontal axis, now you can switch between targets, or even on bigger creatures or models, then you can switch between targets on their body. For our instance, we have a giant, so you can switch between targeting his feet and then even his head, because sometimes maybe you have like a bow and you want to shoot their head. So those were some of the first main things we implemented in about 1 month. Second month, we jumped into creating character stats and also stats for independent weapons. Then after that, we started working on the user interface, so getting like a health bar up, a stamina bar, but then also you've got item slots, which basically shows what weapons you have equipped. We started getting the enemies that we had in the scene to actually be more interactable, so that when you attacked them, they essentially would take damage, they'd have their own stats, but they weren't necessarily had AI to them, it was just simple script giving them reactions. We also started developing our parry system, making it so that when an enemy attacked you, you could essentially parry, and that gives you an opportunity to get like some kind of special attack on them. And then we also implemented a backstab. We know humanoids tend to have limited perception, so to be able to sneak up on them and stab them in the back and be able to do massive damage is a big deal. Gives players a little bit more of a variety in the kind of combat they can do. Then another thing we started implementing was obviously using the shield, so being able to parry with it, but also to be able to start blocking with it. First, the animation wasn't great and it needed some help. One of the things we did later was we implemented an IK system that basically allowed us to manually adjust how the animation was going to look when you perform the animation. Obviously, in between all these different months of progress, there's a lot more like smaller details, debugging certain things that we went through, but these are just some of the core aspects I can kind of show you. So that was pretty much all we did in the second month progress that I went. In the third month of our progress in the tutorial, we started implementing like an inventory system through code, making it so that when you had certain weapons equipped, you would be able to cycle through all those weapons and switch between them. Also wanting to create the ability to two-hand weapons, so that kind of gives you a little bit more variety in terms of maybe you're fighting a creature and you want to do more damage, or maybe you're fighting a player and you want to change up your animations when you're fighting them so that you're a little more unpredictable. One of the other big things was starting to create combinations with your attacks so that when you would hit the attack button, you wouldn't just always do one animation, but making it so you could have 1 to 2 to 3 follow-up animations with those. This is also when we really started working with the ability to roll, creating our evasion system, and then also a jump back system where you could quickly just jump back. Within this time is when we started working with animation events. Basically what this does is it allows you to take a public function within your code and apply it directly to a specific time in an animation when the animation plays. We use this to lock our players' movement, rotation, or ability to perform other actions. For example, if your player attacks, we want to make sure that they can't just immediately roll. We need to be able to punish them so that if they attack at the wrong time, there's suddenly this gap period where they can't do anything for that time frame. This gives enemy AIs or players the opportunity to get a hit in on them. Through animation events, you can do tons of things. In the future, I actually use animation events to implement things like sound effects or even activating visual effects. So the time actually ended up bleeding into a little over that third month, and we kind of worked from the third month into about another half month of other progress, implementing things like death animations and stuff for enemies. We created a bit of ragdoll systems so that when they died, they'd kind of crumple. Then one of the other things we started working with in the item prefabs, be able to make it so when you actually perform consuming an item or using the item, we actually have an item and an inventory system for that item where you can switch through it. Some of the ones we made was Estus Flask, where you drink like some kind of potion, and then also we created kind of like a spell type move. Then we started implementing just a punch animation, because obviously at some point you might have to punch an enemy to death. And then also the kick animation, which is very big and important in our game. The last thing that we started working on and implemented in the tutorial before I stopped doing it was setting up gestures. It's not really needed in a game. Most games have it. We wanted to implement it. So we threw in a system with our UI where you could pull up a menu of gestures that you would have selected, and you could choose between each one and play that specific gesture.
So that was pretty great.
Beyond that, about 3.5 months of progress in that tutorial, that is about the time I stopped, because I wanted to specifically start working towards the second part of the game, which was creating this RTS commander controller part. I also wanted to start working on Blender, learning how to use Blender and make models. At the time, we didn't actually have Alex working with us, so I was expecting to do all of the modeling and all of that myself.
Fine. I'll do it myself.
Now, overall, the vision for our character controls, we still want it to be fairly similar to Dark Souls, but some of the ideas has definitely changed. For one, I wanted to really reduce how complicated the stat system Dark Souls really has. It's just so many different numbers and things, and to this day, I can look at all those stats and stuff, and I don't actually know what they mean. So I wanted to create more of a system that was much more simple, easy for players to understand. That was one of the things we wanted to change, and we've actually changed the idea of maybe not necessarily having a health system, but focusing on having more of like an armor system. So we're going to treat your armor's integrity essentially more as like your health. And once when that gets broken, a big hit can really almost either instant kill you, or essentially could take just a few hits or something and die really quickly. We also want to kind of create a bit of a partnership revive system, which Dark Souls doesn't really have, similar to something like Ashen or a lot of squad-based games. Basically, you have the ability where you get knocked to the ground, and then your teammates have the chance to be able to like help revive you and get you back up to get you back in the game. Needless to say, we don't want to make it too easy either. so there's going to be some balancing and figuring out to go with that. So if you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like. If you want to keep following us and see more content that we're going to produce with our game Karvaros, subscribe, check out our social medias, follow us, and if you want to support and do a little more, we do have a Patreon that you can check out. There's a link down in the description below. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time.